All right. Well, thanks for joining us, Chris. I
Good
know
to
that
see
you
you.
have a
Of
busy schedule and we appreciate your time.
course.
Okay. Well, we've all seen the latest uh kind of monthly-ish update. It's been about 2 months since the previous update, and I know that's a very curated video, and you just hit the highlights. Can you kind of tell us what's been going on? Is there anything details you can flesh out for us about what's been going on in the past 2 months?
Oh gosh, we film those updates and then we kind of hold onto them to release. So it's been so busy around here. I don't even know that I've really reflected on that update. But it's really just being busy with getting the first production intent parts in, building up these first vehicles, uh, finishing up a lot of the electrical engineering, firmware, software, app, UI, that sort of stuff. A lot of the mechanical stuff has been done for a very long time. Um, we had this suspension development stuff, which kind of lingered because we had two different software models between what they had in Italy and what we had here. So they wanted to correlate the data that they had and the way that they were finishing up the suspension, because they were the ones responsible for releasing the frame design. So torsional rigidity and how the suspension acted overall was something that we definitely wanted to have good data on. And the real world testing that we did in Italy, I think, let them finally put a pin in that. But to be honest, it didn't change
Okay.
hardly any. A couple hairs worth of degree changes here and there was all that they suggested, and we did take their suggestions because they're very good at what they do.
Okay.
um, so it's really been just how do we prepare for the first real testing and validation phases now that we put a pin in all the mechanical design. The electrical design and firmware and software can kind of be a little slower,
Sure.
but a lot of the big parts, especially like the body and chassis tooling, they just take so long to build those big ass parts.
Hmm.
Get those done first, get the vehicles here, and then we can refine and tune and do software and firmware and all that stuff basically along the way. So that's what's been keeping us busy, is just vendor agreements and contracts to get these first parts here and receiving these parts, and seeing what really works for production. Some things may only exist with the PI vehicles, and then we'll have to switch to another vendor for volume production. So that's also an interesting balancing act, is some of the volume suppliers are like, no, we can't just build you 20 of these parts. Like
I see.
either we build you 1,000 or we build you nothing.
Uh-huh.
There are some situations like that we've been having to sort through, but Jordan on the supply chain side has been doing an amazing job, and our help in Italy and Europe has been great, and even our partners in Asia have been doing some awesome things over the last couple months.
Okay. So going back to that suspension design, I noticed in the update that the suspension that you guys were using the beta for the suspension, but the beta like swing arms and all that stuff are different than the CAD drawings of the PI vehicle. So,
Uh, it's really all about the pivot points on where the suspension moves about.
mm,
So the production arms and stuff, they do look a bit different, but
mhm.
they're not really different in how they function.
Okay.
And so we went through some efforts on manufacturability and weight savings and stuff like that, and that changed the way some of the arms looked.
Mhm.
But from a kinematics perspective, they all still function the same. And the difference between the beta suspension and what became the gamma suspension, we had a beta suspension. We went out,
Right.
we did our testing, we refined that a good bit, and then went back and built basically a gamma suspension
Mhm.
that we're testing. And that's really what we sent over to Europe, was this
Okay.
kind of gamma-ish suspension. And they basically said, it very close, but we suggest, these changes and these changes,
Mhm.
some of which got us a little better turning radius, some of which got us a little better low speed predictability
Okay.
when driving. So kind of some of the nuances of daily driving that some of these guys that have built, cars and vehicle programs for the last 30 years know that, our young team here hasn't had as much experience with. But, we've had some amazing contributors to the suspension. We worked with Roush Engineering to start to get the basics of the suspension, then basically had our own team work on it for 6 months ish. And then that got us to the Gamma suspension, and then had Denise Engineering basically design it for manufacturability and how we actually produce 50 to 100,000 of these things a year. So from the bushings to the materials, to the draft angles, to how we actually connect other stuff like the brake hoses and things like that to it. That was really what Denise kind of took across the finish line.
Okay. And then you
Along the
said,
way, they
uh-huh.
had some suggestions because you get new engineers involved and they look at it and they're like, oh, well, if you do this, could be a little, if you do this, you could be a little better. So
Okay, got it. And so now, as of like, I guess a few weeks ago, that the suspension design is like finalized, and you can send it to the supplier to make, right?
yes, yeah.
And so is that what's happening now? Is it being made?
Yeah, we haven't chosen all the suppliers for all the metal parts, so we're still considering some different quotes
Mhm,
on who we want to make what parts. And some of it's a timing consideration, some of it's a money consideration.
mhm,
But obviously we want parts as quickly as possible so we can test. I know our last interview, we thought that we'd probably have prototypes in July, August, and here we are in May. So
mhm.
time is creeping by for sure.
Yeah.
And I think we could still probably have some vehicles rolling around in August. Our target is still July.
Uh-huh.
Releasing these big metal parts for the chassis and suspension so late, we're really going to be waiting on those things, especially like the big it'll be a die casting at the end of the day for the rear of the suspension and the front clip that holds the front suspension. Those are big complex parts, and
Mhm,
to get them sand cast and then post milled
mhm.
it just takes longer than if you were to able to smash them out of a die like the gigapress does for Tesla parts and other stuff.
How about the big frame that goes around the battery? Is that one large piece or is that multiple pieces?
Well, there's a battery frame, and then there's
Uh-huh.
a frame that goes up to the body structure.
Uh-huh.
They're both separate and distinct. The battery frame is really just extruded aluminum
Uh-huh.
that has these corner die cast nodes that get welded together, and
Mhm.
then there's kind of center supports that support the vehicle longitudinally and laterally.
Maybe
Um,
I'm calling it the wrong thing. I'm talking about like that, I guess the chassis then. The thing that the battery like
sure.
drops into, that it looks like a big oval ring, and like the front wheels and the back wheels attached to that.
Yeah, we've been calling it the frame or
The
the chassis. If it's
okay.
got suspension on it, then you'd call it a chassis. If it's
Uh-huh.
just the frame without the suspension arms, then you'd probably just call it a frame.
Yeah, so is that frame one piece? And
That frame is 6 pieces right now.
okay.
And we think that we could combine a couple of those pieces and bring it down to 4 pieces in the future. It would just cost more tooling cost in the future.
So
Um,
is
but
that
we'll have
thing made or is that being made?
it's being made right now. So
Okay.
the last changes that Denise made was to the front suspension.
Mhm,
So where those pickup points are for the front suspension, and now that that's done, we've released all. And it's been a couple weeks
mhm.
since we released that, but it's been off with the suppliers, and some suppliers are a few weeks, and some suppliers are a few months. So we're really evaluating those. I think we had a meeting on it yesterday, but I
Okay.
don't put a pin on exactly who we're going to have make those parts. But that the rails and then basically the two end caps that hold the front and rear suspension,
Mhm.
those will be made separately, and then we'll probably bring them back here to be welded up, or we'll have one of the shops that we know put it on a jig table and weld it up. But obviously, it has to be very dimensionally tolerant because
Mhm.
the rear suspension has to be aligned with the front suspension,
Right.
or weird things happen.
Right, right. Okay. So we don't know. So they're if they're being made and you haven't even picked a supplier for the suspension parts yet.
Well, we have the suppliers for the production parts. The
Uh-huh.
problem is getting these 16 development vehicles done. So
Okay.
We're starting with 3, and then we'll build the rest after the first 3, because we'll
Mhm.
probably learn some from putting together the first 3.
Mhm.
That's where we're at now.
But
Is
the production guys are like, we can't make you 20 of them.
Yeah, they don't
Okay.
play that game.
Okay.
But some of them do, but it's very expensive and they take a long time. So,
Uh-huh.
there's shops that specialize in just quick turning
Mhm.
milled aluminum stuff, and they're all over the world.
I see.
A lot of great shops in LA, a lot of great shops in Detroit, a lot of great
Mhm.
shops in Asia. There are some great shops in Italy, in
Mhm.
Europe. So that's we've got quotes out to all those places.
I see. So it's kind of like backwards from the way that I imagined it. I imagined that you guys would do the PI vehicles and find those suppliers, but actually you guys have already found the production suppliers. Like that's been nailed down. And it's
Yeah, one of
these
the
like prototype suppliers that you guys are trying to figure out now.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about the CPC relationship was they also brought, a whole world of supply chain stuff that is used to doing vehicles in our volumes,
Mhm.
supercar world and, low volume production European vehicles. It's
Mhm.
not something that really exists in the US. So you go to Detroit and you ask somebody, hey, do you build 20,000, 50,000 vehicles a year? And they're like, no, we don't want
Yeah.
your build. We want the 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 vehicle programs, or we're
Mm.
not interested. So so yeah, over a year ago, when we started to finalize our designs for the main bink structure and body structure, then we got introduced to a lot of great connections in Europe that CPC has worked with,
Mhm.
great working relationships with over the years, and they build volume parts for Fiat and Maserati and
Mhm.
VW and a lot of European brands like that. So
Okay.
they're they're
So
well capable, but they're also used to building for 10, 20, 50,000 units a year, not necessarily 500,000.
mm. So most of your production suppliers are relationships that you got through CPC, so they're most likely European suppliers.
I would say most of the mechanical components
Mhm.
have been European. So the body structure, the frame, the chassis, those things have come from Europe. The
Okay.
glass, is a Spanish company from Spain. The interior company is in Italy there. So, but the electronics and battery stuff, that's not something that CPC really had relationships for. So we found that on our own.
Right. So in the update, it looked like you guys had like a local partner that was doing the tab welding on the battery packs that you're testing now.
Yeah, it's the supplier that sells us the robots to do it ourselves. So we
Okay.
have California Energy Commission grant, and we're
Mhm.
we're testing out the robots, and then they'll end up on the floor here to make the battery packs here, along with the automation equipment that CTNS is building for us. So,
Okay.
um, we're responsible for the design and validation of that design for the battery modules and the battery pack and the power
Mhm.
distribution and the busing and all that stuff, contactors, DC, FC, fast charge, that sort of stuff. But CTNS, they do the automation to actually build it at scale and really churn through the volume on that stuff. So
Okay. So they're not going to be the ones, CTNS is not building the packs for the PI vehicles.
they are building the factory
Uh-huh.
in Korea that will build those packs. And
Mhm.
then they're going to transport that factory here and build
Mhm.
those packs for us here.
Okay. But
But
that's
they're
for
more
the,
responsible for the factory part of it,
right.
not
They're,
necessarily the design logic or any of the validation or anything.
okay. Yeah. So they're building the machine to build the machine. Um, but but like these test production intent vehicles, not the production vehicles, the production intent vehicles, CTNS is not building those packs. You guys are building those packs kind of one by one.
Yeah, they're doing manufacturing trials. So they're actually building battery modules now too, but
Okay.
that to validate how they're going to build them in volume production.
Okay.
We'll be making, like, if we learn anything from our validation durability testing, like
Uh,
this week, one of our battery modules is off at a shaker jig, and it'll shake it, up to what is 150,000 miles of durability. And we'll see if, any of the hold down brackets break, or um, if any of the ends of the power busing, shake too much and break one of the welds or something. I mean, it's to just test, the durability of the thing.
mhm.
But if we learn anything, then we would make those changes
Mhm.
and CTNS would build that module per our changes.
Mhm.
So we're responsible for design, release, and validation. They're responsible for how does the robot pick up the cell, put it in the module? How does the robot put the current collector plate on it and then send it over to the robot that welds it all, then sends it over to the foam machine that pots it. And then you got this, stack of battery modules. How does the robot pick up that stack of battery modules and put it into a 6-module pack?
Hmm.
Load up the power distribution, close up the pack, seal the pack, and have it ready for, installation into an Aptera vehicle. So they'll perfect that manufacturing of the pack in
Mhm.
Korea and
Okay,
probably build the first couple hundred packs there.
I
And then
see.
they'll ship those packs to us for the first couple hundred vehicles. And then we'll take a pause while they ship all the manufacturing equipment, that whole assembly line here and
Oh, okay.
in California and in Carlsbad, then we'll be producing those modules and packs here.
Okay, so the plan is not to have two concurrent battery lines. You're gonna move the whole battery line from Korea to there.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yep.
okay. 'Cause I kind of thought that like they were gonna build it and then you were gonna build a second one here and then like build them together or something.
If we had infinite capital,
Oh, you would do
we
that.
could do some
Because I'm
simple
guessing
stuff.
that the equipment must be very expensive then, so it must be worth the shipping cost of shipping it over.
Yeah, the most expensive part is the armed robots that move stuff around and have to be really accurate.
Mm,
And laser welding robots that weld the current collector onto the battery modules. They're just they're expensive pieces of tech.
yeah.
Uh, they're not terribly huge or difficult to ship. So,
Mhm.
we have to decide, are we going to put those things on a plane or are we going to ship them by sea? I imagine we're probably going to put them on a plane and ship them over here.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. So when are you thinking like if you when you find these like small shops to make the frame and the suspension parts, how long is that going to take? Is it going to take a month to make it, 2 months to make it? Because I mean, we're waiting on
Um,
that before we can have a drivable PI, right?
yeah, I mean, the quickest frame quote we got was 22 days.
Oh, okay.
It's pretty aggressive.
Yeah,
But it ranges from, kind of 22 days to 12 weeks.
right.
Uh, so we're trying to pick something that, matches our schedule. It's not, having it here too early doesn't help either. So paying a lot
Correct.
of money to have it here in, 3 weeks, if we're not ready for it with other components, that
Right.
doesn't do anything either. So, but the electrical team is making great progress, with the wiring harness and the drivetrain and all the, complementary electronics. So, I think in 2 or 3 weeks, the EE team will be ready. So
Mhm.
I think if we can get the frame parts here in a month or 6 weeks, I
Mhm.
think that's probably a good bet to try to get those here in that
Okay.
time.
So it
And then
sounded
load
like
them up and,
so kind of best case scenario, we should have like a PI drivable in about 2 months.
I think that's probably a good bet.
Okay. All
In
right.
June, July, so into July, I wouldn't overpromise and say,
Sure.
probably wouldn't be August. And September's not out of the question.
Yeah.
But we're excited to see all this stuff come together, and we want to drive the production version as quickly as possible too. And
Yeah.
I think this is kind of where everything comes together. I've had a lot of companies over the year. This is my ninth startup. I've been through battery development programs, and my first company was computer networking. But every company kind of have this vision for what the product is.
Hmm.
Start making it, and eventually it just seems like things start clicking, and stuff starts to come together. And I've been through a bunch of boat projects where that happens, where you've worked on this thing for 6 months, and now all the pieces of the puzzle come together, and next thing you know, you're out on a lake wakeboarding behind it, and it all is working fabulously. So that's kind of the point where we're at now. We've done all the hard work the last 6 months, and now we're starting to get these parts in, and this is where the fun starts.
Okay, great. Because like I know that at the very beginning, there's a lot of unknowns, right?
Yeah.
When you started when you guys restarted this in what like late 2019, early 2020, there was a lot of unknowns, and there was some thought that like maybe we would have customer vehicles by 2022 or something like that. Obviously, didn't happen.
Yeah,
Um,
we started with a very different vision for what the vehicle could be.
uh-huh,
And the way that we kind of conceived of the vehicle was, 1 to 4,000 vehicles a year. And that's very different than where we ended up.
I see.
And, it's really because of the volume, of interest that we've had that it's like, no, we can't build 3 or 4 thousand of these a year. We've got to build 10, 20, 50,000 of these things a year,
Uh-huh.
or we're just never going to meet demand. And, the whole goal of the company is to make the world a better place through, efficient transportation. It
Uh-huh.
doesn't do anybody or the world any good if we only put 100 out a year.
Uh-huh.
It does the world good if you start to really displace combustion vehicles. And, at 50,000 vehicles a year, that's millions of barrels of oil, that you're taking out. That's, compared to other EVs, that's millions of pounds of extra batteries that weren't wasted on big, heavy, inefficient EVs.
Hmm.
It's just a totally different way to think about how transportation should work. And, we always thought, you gotta price it right so people love it. You got to give it all the performance you can so people, can find it really useful. And, a little inspiration along the way doesn't hurt by making Jason Hill work extra hard to make it sexy and,
Yeah.
looking and extra functional. So I think we've hit on all those marks, and now we've got to, deliver on the promise. And, COVID being in the middle of our plans
Yeah.
did help. And we're really still feeling the effects of COVID. The supply chain, is just finally starting to settle down
Mhm.
after COVID. And the last 6 months, we've seen just dramatic changes in commodity prices for aluminum, battery cell prices, for high nickel content batteries have dropped through the floor.
Mhm.
So it's a very different place that we live in now than we did 6 months ago. And I think I'm
Yeah.
glad that we've had the extra time and that our community's been supportive of us, kind of doing it the right way. And even though we haven't had that benefactor come to us with $100 million check, that we're still making progress every day. And, the first vehicles are right around the corner, and, production's right around after that corner. So, I think we're in a really good spot. Even though times get stressful over the last 2 years for sure on, how do we make it happen, and feeling the pressure of, 48,000 people now that have orders for the Aptera.
Mhm.
We have a great ballpark down here, Petco Park, but it only fits 43,000 people. So we have an overcapacity crowd of
Mhm.
people that are waiting for Aptera. And, we all feel it here, and we want to deliver as soon as we can. And, obviously the sooner that we're cash flow positive, the sooner, all the fundraising stress is off. And, then you're just optimizing and trying to build bigger, better, volumes and different variants of the vehicle, and talking about four-wheeled Apteras and all sorts of fun stuff. So,
Mhm.
so that's the goal. And I've done that with plenty of other companies. Once you get to cash flow positivity, um, things get a lot brighter. So that's the
Mhm.
goal. Vehicles get to cash flow positive quickly. And, now we're on pace for 2025. So let's make it happen.
What do you say with about the idea of like, so you originally when you guys started, you were like, oh, maybe we'll sell like 1,000 of these, maybe 5,000 of these, and I guess you guys were thinking about kind of hand building them one by one down in Carlsbad at that point. Was that what the idea?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd call it hand building,
Uh,
but the tack time of building 3 to 5 a day is
mhm.
very different than building 40 or 80 a day.
Right.
Uh, so, you can station build stuff. That's how a lot of my boats were built
Uh-huh.
in early days, when we were shipping, 700 boats a year. It was just a station. It had 2 or 3 guys in the station, and the boat was just built stem to stern in the station. The
Mhm.
boat shell ended up there, and then they just had a shelf full of parts, and they just installed all those parts until the boat was done. Then you'd go out and run it on a lake and quality check it, and then you'd ship it off to a dealer.
Mhm.
We could have done that with the Aptera,
Okay.
including, the composites, very much so like we built boats, but it's terribly inefficient.
Yeah.
And if you want to scale it, it's very difficult to scale. And, once we had, kind of 10,000, 20,000 orders, it was like, how do we scale this archaic process into something that could deliver, on the mass market promise of Aptera?
Mhm.
And it was apparent that we needed to find new partners. And that's, Akosh found CPC. He had a relationship with him before. He worked at Shelby Supercars, and done amazing projects with them before, and they were just the right fit at the right time. And they just love the promise of solar mobility. I think a lot of what has really gotten us into the good graces of very capable suppliers is that we're so different. Everything else they've worked on could be cool, could be a very sexy sports car, but it ain't solar mobility. It ain't something that looks like the future.
Yeah.
And I think the executives of these companies, they see a presentation like Aptera and they go, "Oh, wow,
Yeah.
that's cool. I want to be associated with that." So
Yeah.
I think
I
that's
think everyone loves the idea and like, the design and about efficiency and all that. So I think that like it's very clear that you guys have a very strong fan base. And look, I started this YouTube channel. I'm not anything of a good YouTuber, but it blew up mainly because of the idea. Um, and so what do you say to the idea of like some people saying like maybe you should have done the 1,000 vehicles a year, delivered some vehicles, and maybe that would have gotten you funding faster because people would say, oh yeah, this company can deliver a vehicle. Like what do you say to that?
well, I've seen other companies make that mistake.
Mhm.
And Sandy Monroe, has advised companies like that, and we've seen companies, go public and do, crazy things, and have that be the case. Um, and we thought, with the expertise of Sandy Monroe and the advice that we've gotten from other people that have been in the manufacturing game,
Mhm.
that if you want to build 50,000 vehicles a year, you need to capitalize the company, you need to organize the company, you need to design your manufacturing plant to build 50,000 vehicles a year.
Mhm.
You can ramp it up slowly, but if you don't build with that mindset, if you start building 2 vehicles a day, and then you tell the plant, hey, we're going to scale from 2 vehicles a day to 4 vehicles a day, people are like, that's twice the amount of work. How
Mhm.
the hell am I going to do that? I'm already working my butt off to build 2 a day, and now you want to build 4 a day?
Mhm.
So, unless you start with, hey, we're going to build 40 a day, and this single shift can build 40 a day, and then we're going to add a second shift that can do just what you're doing, which is building 40 a day. It's just a very difficult path. And I've seen companies waste millions and millions of dollars because they haven't had the mindset from the beginning to really build at a decent volume that they could get, kind of economies of scale and actually become cash flow positive. And it's just buried them slowly. It's just death by 1,000 cuts.
Mhm.
You're inefficient with your workforce, you're inefficient with your space, you're not making any money on the final product. Now you've got, kind of a product that people aren't willing to pay a premium for because it doesn't have enough features. But, oh, we just wanted to start small and we wanted to start simple and we just wanted to get vehicles out there. Well, it just doesn't mesh well with changing the world. And I think we've been lucky to have great advisors like Sandy Monroe, and Sandy Monroe strongly advised us to not design a plant to build 2 of these a day,
Mhm.
or you will succumb to the pressures that a lot of other startups have succumbed to in the transportation space, and it will bury you slowly, and you will rue the day that you showed me a 2 vehicle a day manufacturing plan.
Okay. All right. So if we see, let's say see a PI like August, how long are you guys expecting like all the PI testing and validation to take? Is that going to take like 6 months, 8 months, 9 months?
A lot of the initial stuff gets done pretty quick. I
Mhm.
mean, the crash lab stuff and that stuff, I mean, it happens in weeks. It's really some of the bigger checks that we have to write for like the ABS system and the airbags and stuff like that, that the companies that we have to get on board to do that take a long time. So it sucks that we're kind of beholden to the schedules of other companies once we have funding and start, our own validation. But it's kind of in the 6 to 9 month range.
Okay.
Um, but keep in mind that just because we haven't finished all of the validation with a supplier doesn't mean we can't ship vehicles. So we can add some features after we, ship the first 20 or 100 or 200. You probably don't want too many out in the field where you have to come back in and, flash them for different features and stuff.
Mhm.
But that is something that, we expect. We don't expect like some companies, Ford and GM and Toyota, they would go through every ounce of all of that validation and would never, ship some of their vehicles out until everything is buttoned up. We expect that, you know, some of the stuff, the user interface stuff, will evolve rapidly
Mhm.
as we start to deliver our first vehicles. And, you know, the first deliveries and the first accelerators that have some of the early spots, we're going to expect feedback, and, you know, they're part of the family. And, you know, the first vehicles, you know, whether it's something is squeaking because we didn't put a buffer pad on the back of it or something like that,
Mhm.
you know, we'll learn all of that stuff very quickly. And it's something that I think is largely expected. Um, but, you know, with the anxiousness to get vehicles on the road, I think it's just the right approach. You know, we could take the extra 6 months to really button up everything and have an internal test fleet that, you know, we put over, you know, 2 million miles on and stuff.
Mhm.
But I think, you know, it's just right that we work with all of our validation partners, and, you know, we get the vehicle to a point where we feel it's stable and as safe as it can be.
Mhm.
And then some of the other usability stuff is stuff that we sort out over the first couple months
Yeah.
for deliveries. And then, you know, it takes us kind of 3 to 6 months to ramp up to rate production anyways. So, you know, while we're ramping up to rate production,
Mhm.
we can figure out some of those growing pains, problems, and some of the stuff that you just don't learn until vehicles are in people's hands.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And I think that, you know, you guys are in a good position in that way, because like obviously the first several thousand vehicles are going to go to accelerators, and these people are very invested uh in the success of Aptera, and they'll be willing to help you guys you know, test it. I think the community will be very supportive of that to get out faster.
yeah, I mean, we've been super humbled by the amazing support and you know, kind of thinking through problems that our community has done. I mean, we've got community guys out testing um, the wrap materials in aggressive, you know, New Mexico weather, and we've got guys that are thinking through some of the software data issues for the telematics. And, you know, we've had a lot of great people that have just offered to help as
Mhm.
we for volume production. And I think it'll be the same when we ship our first vehicles. You know, I hope that that people are just ready and willing to embrace the first production vehicles. And you know, if something very minor is wrong, let's get it fixed. Let's get it fixed quick. Let's get a change on the assembly line and start to change every vehicle.
Mhm.
And I think it's something that you know, Tesla did a pretty good job, you know, early on. You know, I had an early Tesla Model S, and I loved it. But from a you know, quality perspective, if you would have compared it to Toyota or Ford or GM, you know, the production engineers in Detroit would have laughed it out of the building. But Tesla was very good at rolling changes, and
Mhm.
when they discovered something that needed to be fixed, they would just fix it. If they discovered a supplier that supplied a better part, a more quality part, they would just switch it. And it's something that Detroit was just not capable of. And I
Right.
think it's something that Tesla really showed the way on, that, hey, you know, these lockdown vehicles where you build the same exact vehicle for 5 years, that is not how manufacturing should work.
Mhm.
You got to take consumer feedback. You got to make the product continually better. You know, some of the Toyota manufacturing methods of continual improvement. And I think Tesla's exemplified that in a lot of ways. And, you know, they've proven to be, you know, with the Model Y, the most popular vehicle in the world now in
Yeah.
sales. So, who would have thought a decade ago that the Tesla Model Y would be the best selling vehicle in the world?
Yeah.
No pundit, no industry analyst, no one would have said that.
Yeah.
But here we are. So, you know, Sandy Monroe agrees with that philosophy, and it's something that he fought in Detroit, you know, all the time.
Mhm.
Their stodginess just wouldn't allow them to fix things. So we want to make the Aptera product better every day. We want to embrace the aftermarket, so, you know, we can have great accessories and support for the vehicle. We want to let people know how their vehicle works. So if they want to make it better or make a product to make it better, then they just know. And, you know, I think that's kind of in the Aptera spirit and the way we want to build a company. So
Yeah, yeah. So you're kind of designing the factory to be just very nimble in the supply chain so that you can like be make changes fairly easily.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, so you know, we've always talked about funding. Funding is obviously the biggest issue for any startup. and I know you spend a lot of your time looking for funding. Um, and so you guys announced this U.S. Capital Group um, partnership. Does this mean that we have funding now?
Yeah, we partner with US Capital and we're working on production funding with them. Nothing in the funding world is a guarantee until the money's in the bank. But we have to close up this crowdfunding and then US Capital is going to get started. And the plan is that, very quickly they can close in on our production funding and we can start to meet our timing goals and push things forward. But they're a diversified global group and they've done tons of deals and they're very, very capable. And we've been nothing but impressed. I mean, we've been working through due diligence with them for the last couple of months. So it's a very rigorous process. But if you have good people on the other side of the equation, then you just work through the work. And they've been very good to work with, and they're excited to get things going. And I dare say, they've done a lot of deals, but Aptera is unique, and hopefully compelling, and something that I think they'll find great success with. So.
Do you know what their success rate is when they take on clients? Are they like 90% successful in their 50%, 100%,
Well, that's a good
10%?
question. I can't speak for them,
Uh-huh.
but they take on a lot of different kind of deals with a lot of different kind of structures.
Uh-huh.
So I would say their success rate is high, and that if they've structured something with a company, then they know they've structured something that's going to be successful. But the last 2 years have been pretty tumultuous for almost all investment banks. So I would say that there's been a lot of investment banks that have had a hard go of it the last few years. And now that we're coming out the other side and the market seemed to look a little brighter and they're starting to see more IPOs and more kind of investment deals, I think a lot of them are looking for a strong recovery. But investment banks in general, I think have been looking for some bright spots, and Aptera is super bright. Solar mobility is hopefully super bright. So I think that U.S. Capital is excited to get going for us, and we're excited to have them.
So is closing down the crowdfunding a stipulation that they made? Like, hey, if we're going to take over, you guys have to close down the crowdfunding.
It's mostly a administrative thing. Big companies like Intel and Microsoft or Google, they could run multiple offerings at the same time and probably keep up with them from a finance and compliance perspective. But that wasn't the advice that we got. Our lawyer, it's best to not have concurrent offerings like this, and it's going to be much easier on you guys if you end the crowdfunding and then start your efforts with US Capital. So they agreed, and that's what we're doing.
Have they given you guys a timeline of like, we think we can find you guys funding in a month, 2 months, 6 months?
Yeah, it's mostly once they have the instrument set up and approved, then they can go out and sell it, and it's certainly a matter of weeks, not months.
I see.
For them to close on things like this. So, I think it's going to be an exciting offering, and we'll release information about it once the SEC FINRA approves, and then we can get going. But the first battle is to close the crowdfunding up strong and keep progress on these PI builds, and hopefully get everybody excited. I've been talking with the marketing team about how do we open the curtain a little more as we get closer to production. So getting to bi-weekly updates or weekly updates, doing a lot more live streams, and inviting more people to the facility here to see what we're doing.
Okay.
It's kind of all part of the conversation. I think
great.
Things get real exciting once we start rolling validation vehicles and setting in production interiors, and you're touching production buttons and switches, and so that's what we're looking forward to over the next couple of months, and that's exciting.
Yes, absolutely. And I've been saying I want to come down as soon as the drivable PI is down there. So looking like August, September-ish. So we'll plan on that. So I'm guessing that US Capital Group has done vetting of you guys as well before they entered into this relationship. Like, they wouldn't take you guys on as a client unless they thought that they could raise the funding, right?
Yeah, I mean,
like if you guys would have gone to them like 2 years ago, they would have been like, nah, you guys aren't ready for us.
It would, they might have been interested in working with us, but it had just been on a very different deal.
I see.
So
Okay.
now that we're talking about production funding,
Mhm.
it's a very straightforward path to, hey, we need this money to fund this operation, to scale this vehicle. We have $1.75 billion worth of orders. All we need is the production equipment to make it happen. So it's a very different kind of conversation with them about what deal they structure for us than it would have been 2 years ago.
Mm.
But they have their own, due diligence process, and we go through their due diligence and checks, and obviously they're looking to sell us to their client base and through their network of brokers. And those brokers and clients want to have confidence that we've been well vetted, and we feel like we have been well vetted. And I think we're one of the most public companies out there in the tech world for sure. We share a lot of information. I think there's lots of discoverable information about us out there. So I think that's made for a different kind of conversation with U.S. Capital, because most of the companies they work with, there's just not a lot of public information. You don't know a lot about them, so you got to dig a little deeper.
Mhm.
But they've been to the facility, they've driven around. We had the tequila event with them, and then they
Okay,
went.
so that was US Capital Group at the
Yeah,
tequila event.
that was U.S. Capital Group.
I see. Got it.
Great tequila at Califino here in San
Uh-huh.
Diego. And,
Yeah, it looked like a fun event.
yeah,
Okay. All right. I think that's all I got, Chris. Thank you so much for your time.
it's only like 42 minutes, man. You got to have more questions than that.
Well, you got anything else to tell us?
No, I think I'm just excited to get to the point where we're starting to see more tangible stuff,
Yeah.
and really start to put our last 2 years worth of effort into action.
Mhm.
And the problem with designing for high volume production is you got to wait longer. If we were designing for low volume production, you'd probably be able to see stuff a lot quicker.
Yeah.
It's definitely built the anticipation for me and everybody around here to get these first parts and see it. But it's also a lot greater sense of accomplishment, because we know it can go that much bigger and that much awesomer when we really start to ship a lot of vehicles out of here. So,
Yeah.
40 vehicles a day being right around the corner is a great place to be. So,
Yeah. I mean, I think it's crucial that that people see a PI build soon, because like there is this huge community of people that are very, very excited about Aptera. And they've been waiting for years now. And I think there's a small percentage that's kind of losing hope at this point. And the longer it goes, that small percentage gets bigger. And
yeah.
so I think seeing a PI build will really re-energize everyone. And so,
Well, we're thankful for the support that we've had, and we're super humbled that amazingly smart and talented people have put their dollars to work in Aptera to see this vision happen. And we're awesomely grateful that people have kind of given us the leeway to work through the pandemic, to work through some of the funding constraints that we've had, to get to a point now that we have a really great story and a finished vehicle and an economy that doesn't seem like it's going down the crapper, so we can get some financial support.
mhm.
And now's the time where we put all those pieces of the puzzle together. So I would just tell people to stay tuned and stay engaged with our story. And if you loved us a couple years ago and you made the reservation, hopefully you're going to love us even more in the next few months, because you're going to see a lot of tangible stuff about us pushing to production. And I know that if you order 20,000, that you're still even more ways away from receiving your vehicle.
Right.
But seeing the first vehicles drive around and getting the kind of press we're going to get from those vehicles, and having some events at the factory so you can come down and see us before you get your actual vehicle. Hopefully being able to do a US tour where we take the first production vehicles around and have pop-ups in major cities. We'll hopefully get the vehicle close to you, and just thankful that people are continuing to stay supportive and excited to share our story over the next coming months as we push to production. So your channel has been an amazing resource in keeping people informed, and it's given us a great feedback gateway, because you bring up stuff in your videos. Sometimes I'm like, where the hell did you get that? Sometimes I'm like, oh, that's exactly right. How didn't you know that? But we get great feedback from everybody that watches your channel, and we're we're terribly grateful that you spend your time thinking about us and thinking about ways to spit out content that could help get us feedback from our community, and it's gone really well. So I
Yeah,
can't wait.
I'm happy to do my part.
Can't
And
wait to see you get that first silver play button from YouTube, and start to really scale. Imagine, the first NBC nightly news drive of a production Aptera, and how many more people are going to subscribe to your channel.
oh
Uh,
yeah. I mean, if you guys succeed, our channel succeeds. So I mean, I want you guys to succeed, obviously.
Imagine how many free Aptera you're going to get from your referral program. And then you can start your own race series, and then you can have a dual channel. So one's the race series channel, one's the Aptera info channel.
Yeah, no, we got all kinds of plans. Like one of the things I want to do is like have like, since it's right to repair is one of the things that we really love about Aptera, people are gonna like submit their repair videos and be like, hey,
Oh
here's
yeah.
how you do this and here's how you do that. And so that would be like, we want to be a resource for that kind of stuff. And like mods and like, you can modify your Aptera to do this, or like, here's this aftermarket thing. Like there'll be a whole ecosystem that grows up around this thing. I think like probably one of the most engaged fan bases. You guys have one of the most engaged fan bases of
Oh yeah.
almost any
Yeah.
product out there. So it's pretty remarkable, actually.
Marketing does reports, and we have the most engaged social media just under Tesla and Mercedes.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
exactly.
think of all the other brands you've heard of in the automotive EV space. We're third.
Right.
In
And
engagement.
and you guys don't even have a production vehicle. Like once there's a production vehicle driving around, those numbers gonna go through the roof, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Tesla, they've got over 1 million vehicles on the road. Mercedes just spending a ton of money on marketing.
Mhm.
We don't really have a marketing budget. We have a communications budget.
Yeah.
It's awesome to see that people are really talking about Aptera and getting excited about our future. And I think it'll only get better over the next 6 months. And once we start to hand people vehicles and they start to talk about it and live stream and have channels like yours cover them, it's going to be an exciting time.
Can't wait till September or whenever that PI vehicle is.
Can't wait to have you here at the shop to see it.
All right. Good talking to you. Thanks, Chris.
Appreciate it, Steve. Thanks, everybody.